There is a ship sitting in a Chinese shipyard right now that does not need a single person on board to cross the Pacific Ocean. No captain, no crew, no lights on inside the cabins because there is nobody there to turn them on. It can load itself, plan its own route around storms, dock itself at the other end, and radio back to a control room on land the entire way. It sounds like something from a science fiction movie, but it already exists. It has already made real commercial voyages, and it is only one piece of something much bigger. China is not just building ships anymore. It is quietly rebuilding the entire machine that moves the world's goods from one continent to another, and almost nobody outside the shipping industry has noticed how far along it already is. For the last 80 years, global trade has run on a system built mostly by the West. American and European naval engineering set the standards. Western banks financed the fleets. Western ports set the pace. Container shipping itself was invented in the United States in the 1950s, and for decades the biggest, fastest, most advanced ships on the ocean flew flags from Denmark, Switzerland, and Germany. That order is not gone yet, but it is cracking, and the cracks are showing up in Chinese shipyards faster than almost anyone expected. Today we are counting down 6 of the most advanced cargo ships China has built or is building right now, and the ship at number 1 is the one that shipping executives in Europe are the most nervous about because it does not just move cargo faster. It removes the need for a huge part of the industry that has existed since ships first crossed oceans. If stories about the technology quietly reshaping the world are your thing, go ahead and hit that like button before we get into this one, because these breakdowns take a genuinely long time to research and put together, and it helps more than you would think. And if you are new here, subscribing means you will not miss the next one, because this list only gets stranger from here. Stick around, because number 1 on this list is a ship most people in the shipping industry did not believe was possible 5 years ago. Number 6. The reshape, the ship that sails itself. Start with the one that sounds the most impossible because it is real and it is already working. The reshape is a 300-foot cargo vessel built by a joint venture between a Chinese shipyard and one of the country's leading AI research labs, and it completed its first fully autonomous open ocean voyage carrying commercial cargo without a single crew member aboard. Not a reduced crew. Not a backup captain sitting in a chair just in case. 0 people on the ship for the entire trip. Here is how it actually works. The vessel runs on a navigation system trained on more than 300,000 hours of real ocean voyage data, learning how experienced human captains actually respond to fog, cross-traffic, sudden weather shifts, and near misses with fishing fleets. That system does not just follow a preset route the way an autopilot on a plane does. It makes live decisions, the same category of decisions a human officer on the bridge would make, and it does it faster than a person can, because it is cross-referencing satellite weather data, radar returns, and traffic patterns from hundreds of other vessels at the same time. A human brain simply cannot hold that much information at once. The ship can. The obvious question is what happens when something breaks, and this is where it gets interesting. The reshape is monitored from a shore control center that can take over specific functions remotely if the AI flags something outside its confidence range, similar to how an air traffic controller can talk a pilot through an unusual situation. But in its early test voyages, human intervention was needed only a handful of times, and most of those were precautionary, not emergencies. Why does this matter for global trade? Because crew costs are one of the largest recurring expenses in ocean shipping, and crew shortages have been a real, well-documented problem across the industry for years. Officers with the right certifications are expensive and increasingly hard to find, especially for long, monotonous ocean crossings. A ship that needs no crew at all does not just cut costs. It removes an entire category of operational risk, insurance liability, and staffing headache that every other shipping company on Earth is still stuck dealing with. Number 5. The methanol giants quietly replacing the dirtiest ships on Earth. Container shipping has a problem that almost nobody who has never worked in the industry knows about. The giant diesel engines that power most cargo ships burn a type of fuel so thick and dirty it is closer to tar than gasoline, and a single one of the largest container ships can produce as much pollution in a year as 50 million cars. That is not a typo. 50 million. China's answer to this is a fleet of new ultra-large container ships built to run on methanol instead of traditional bunker fuel. And the scale of the rollout is what makes this different from every other green shipping pilot project you may have heard about. This is not one experimental ship. Chinese shipyards have delivered dozens of methanol dual-fuel vessels in the last 2 years alone, more than the rest of the world combined, and Chinese state shipping companies have ordered dozens more, locking in a supply chain advantage that competitors in South Korea and Japan are scrambling to match. Methanol burns dramatically cleaner than traditional marine fuel, cutting sulfur emissions by more than 90% and significantly reducing the soot particles that traditional bunker fuel throws into the upper atmosphere over shipping lanes. The engines can also switch back to traditional fuel if methanol is not available at a given port, which matters because right now methanol refueling infrastructure barely exists outside of a small number of Chinese ports. That is not a weakness. It is a strategy. By building the ships first and the fuel supply chain to match, Chinese shipping companies are betting that the rest of the world's ports will eventually be forced to build methanol infrastructure just to stay compatible with the new fleet, the same way an entire industry once had to build itself around the standard shipping container. Number 4. The 24,000 container monster that makes the world's biggest ships look small. For years, the largest container ships on Earth belonged to a Swiss shipping giant. Vessels so large that a single one could carry roughly 24,000 shipping containers stacked in rows taller than a 6-story building. China now builds and operates several ships in that exact same size class, and it is closing in on the record for the largest container ship ever constructed. To understand the scale here, picture a single ship carrying enough containers that, if you lined every truck needed to move that cargo overland bumper to bumper, the line would stretch for more than 100 miles. One trip. One vessel. The ship is longer than the height of the world's tallest building laid on its side, and it is powered by an engine block roughly the size of a small apartment building, generating more horsepower than a fleet of 100 freight trains combined. What makes the Chinese version of these megaships different is not just the size, it is the speed at which the shipyards can build them. A ship of this scale traditionally takes close to 3 years to design and construct from keel to delivery. Chinese state shipyards have compressed that timeline into closer to 18 months for repeat orders, because the same hull design, the same steel modules, and the same automated welding lines are being reused across an entire production run instead of custom engineering each ship individually. That is the part Western shipbuilders genuinely cannot match right now, not because they lack the engineering talent, but because they no longer have shipyards built at the scale needed to run that kind of production line. Most of that capacity moved to Asia decades ago, and it never came back. If you're finding any of this as wild as I did putting it together, this is a good spot to hit that subscribe button, because number 3 on this list is the ship that is quietly opening up a shipping route the rest of the world assumed would not be usable for another 50 years. Number 3. The ice-class fleet cracking open the Arctic. There is a route across the top of the world that could cut the sailing distance between China and Europe by roughly a third compared to the traditional route through the Suez Canal. For most of modern history, it has been unusable for regular cargo shipping because it is frozen solid most of the year, and the ice that does remain can crush a normal ship's hull like a soda can. China has been quietly building a fleet of polar-class ice-breaking cargo vessels specifically designed to operate along this route, reinforced with steel hulls up to 3 times thicker than a standard container ship and hull shapes engineered to ride up onto sea ice and crack it under the ship's own weight rather than plow straight through it. Several of these vessels have already completed test voyages along the route during the summer ice melt window, cutting weeks off delivery times for certain cargo runs between Chinese ports and Northern Europe. The strategic value here goes far beyond faster delivery times. The traditional Suez Canal route runs through some of the most politically unstable and heavily contested waters on Earth, choke points that have been shut down entirely by accidents, blockades, and regional conflict in just the last few years alone. A working Arctic route that does not depend on any of those choke points is not just a shortcut. It is an insurance policy against exactly the kind of disruption that has cost the global shipping industry billions of dollars in the recent past. And because the route runs close to Russian territorial waters, it also plugs into an existing energy and trade relationship that has been deepening for years, giving Chinese shipping companies a level of access to this route that other nations simply do not have. Number 2. The port that runs itself. A ship is only as fast as the port it is loading and unloading at, and this next entry is not technically a ship at all, but it changes what every ship on this list is capable of, so it earns its place here. At the port of Yangshan near Shanghai, an entire container terminal operates with almost no human workers physically present on the dock. Autonomous electric container trucks move cargo between the dock and storage yards without drivers. Automated cranes load and unload ships around the clock, guided by a system that tracks every single container's exact position using a network of sensors accurate to within a few centimeters. Human workers still exist, but they sit in a control room, monitoring dozens of machines at once instead of operating one crane or driving one truck each. The result is a terminal that can operate at close to full capacity 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, without fatigue, without shift changes slowing things down, and without the labor disputes that have periodically shut down major ports elsewhere in the world for days or weeks at a time. Turnaround time for a large container ship at Yangshan, meaning the total time from arrival to fully unloaded and reloaded and back out to sea, is now measured in a fraction of the time it takes at many major Western ports still running on a mix of automated and manual systems. Multiply that efficiency gain across dozens of Chinese ports, handling a combined volume of cargo larger than the next several countries combined, and you start to see why global shipping executives increasingly describe Chinese port infrastructure as the single biggest structural advantage in the entire system, bigger even than the ships themselves. This is exactly the kind of quiet infrastructure story that never trends anywhere, so if you want more of these, subscribing genuinely helps this channel keep finding them. Now, number 1. The ship that ties all of this together, and the one that has European shipping executives the most concerned about what the next decade of global trade actually looks like. Number 1. The floating mothership concept that could make traditional container ports optional. Every ship on this list so far solves one specific problem: faster crossings, cleaner fuel, bigger cargo capacity, a shorter route, faster port. The final entry is different because it is not trying to solve one problem. It is trying to remove an entire step from the global shipping process altogether. Chinese engineering firms are currently developing what industry analysts have started calling mothership logistics, a system where one enormous ultra-large vessel carries the bulk of a shipment across the open ocean and never actually enters a traditional port at all. Instead, the mothership anchors offshore, and a fleet of smaller, faster, often autonomous feeder vessels shuttle out to meet it, load a portion of the cargo, and ferry it directly into smaller regional ports that were never built to handle a ship of the mothership size. Think about why that matters. Right now, the biggest cargo ships on Earth are limited by the depth and size of the handful of ports on the planet actually built to receive them. That is a real bottleneck. It is part of the reason certain massive ships can only call at a small list of approved deepwater ports worldwide, adding days of extra travel for cargo that needs to end up somewhere smaller. A mothership system breaks that constraint completely. The largest, most efficient ship on the ocean never has to slow down for a shallow harbor again. It just drops anchor in open water and lets smaller ships do the last leg of the journey. Early pilot versions of this system have already been tested along Chinese coastal routes, using autonomous feeder vessels similar in design to the Zhifei from earlier on this list, coordinating automatically with the mothership's own scheduling system to time their approach without a single radio call between human operators. If this scales the way Chinese shipping companies are planning, it does not just make individual voyages faster. It restructures which ports matter at all, potentially routing enormous volumes of global trade away from traditional shipping hubs in Europe and North America and toward a Chinese-controlled network of motherships and feeder fleets that the rest of the world does not currently have an equivalent for. That is the part that should actually make you pause. This is not a list of impressive engineering projects sitting in isolation. Every ship, every port, every fuel system on this list connects to every other one. The autonomous ships need the automated ports to make sense economically. The automated ports need the larger fleet of ultra-large vessels to justify their scale. The Arctic route needs the ice-class ships. The mothership concept needs the smaller autonomous feeders. China did not build one impressive ship. It built an entire connected system, end-to-end, from the fuel in the tank to the last truck on the dock, and it built almost all of it in under a decade. For most of modern history, the countries that controlled global shipping controlled an enormous amount of leverage over global trade itself, because moving goods across oceans has always been the slowest, most expensive, and most vulnerable link in the entire supply chain. Whoever builds the fastest, cheapest, most reliable way to move cargo does not just win contracts. They quietly set the terms that everyone else in global trade has to operate within. The ships on this list are not a curiosity. They are a preview of who is going to be setting those terms for the next several decades, and right now, It is not the countries that have been setting them for the last 80 years. If you made it all the way to the end of this one, thank you genuinely, because I know this was a long one. If any part of this surprised you the way it surprised me while researching it, hit that like button and subscribe so you catch the next breakdown, because there is a follow-up story about what is happening at Chinese shipyards right now that is even bigger than anything on this list, and it is coming soon. Now I actually want to hear from you. Out of everything on this list, which one do you think the rest of the world is the least prepared for? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one.